Thank you, John, and good morning, team. Thank you so much for joining in for the discussion on insight into the life cycle of testing critical security updates. Um, let's get started. We started to chase a problem where we were supposed to certify hotfixes or critical updates or content releases, which was a daily release cycle for us, and simultaneously bring in high quality confidence to this testing. Now, the problem that we were trying to solve was test and certify hotfixes, which were scheduled for daily releases. Now, these hotfixes were supposed to be tested on a bunch of product sets. Now, these product sets had different versions which are active in the field, and the combination of these product and versions are deployed in an array of operating systems that they support. Now, this was the broad stroke of the problem that we wanted to address. And before we jump into this, let's look at why hotfix is such a big, important cornerstone of any software release cycle. Hotfix is not your regular, typical mainline release. It does not enjoy the luxury of a detailed test cycles or test schedules. It is something which comes up as an emergency patch to patch existing already pre-installed releases. So we need to have a seamless upgrade mechanism in place. Obviously, the assumption, which is a safe assumption to make, that a hotware once installed does not break any existing functionality of either the parent software or any of the third-party softwares. So all of this, the sky is the limit about the expectations we have from a hotfix when it gets rolled out to production. But look at the reality how a hotfix is tested. Hotfixes are tested in an extremely time-crunched manner. You're expecting a lot of quality confidence in this time-crunched testing cycle. And the reality we live in, anyone who has been in the industry for quite long knows that always and sometimes we see a hotfix breaking a feature and we release a hotfix for a hotfix. That's the reality that we have lived by. At least in our careers, we have seen a couple of examples of such cases. So how many times a hotfix rollout has brought down the servers? You would have seen instances of it at least a couple of times. So now let's try to put a boundary around the problem that we were trying to address. Again, to reiterate, we had a problem of addressing hotfixes, which were daily scheduled, and for a series of products, different product sets, each having different versions and supported on different operating systems. So putting a theoretical boundary to this problem, the number of products that we wanted to test with, that's represented by the set PN, each individual P1 to P12 are different products. I'm just assumed P12 as the higher number of products that are active in the field for our customers. And VM is the version of individual product release that is active for this particular product series. So your PNVM set is the superset of the product versions, product and product versions, which are currently active in the field. Now, this set can be installed on an array of operating system. The operating system set is defined by your another set of data variables, that is OSN. Now, this could be anywhere and anything which could accommodate Windows, Linux, or even Mac. Predominantly, it's a Windows environment. What hotfixes we are talking about, this is a desktop world reference that we are taking up. And those hotfixes are for products which are desktop installed. Now, primarily, this could be a desktop customer, as in an end consumer customer, or it could be an enterprise customer. But the problem area of limitation is we are trying to solve a personalized PC, endpoint problem. Okay, so looking at the operating system set, again coming back to the problem, now operating systems in turn have different versions available, and each version, for example, Windows 7 had Windows 7 and Windows 7 SP1. Windows 10 had close to 12 plus releases, right from RH1, RH2 all the way till 21H2 will be a reality soon. So this is a different version of releases within a given major operating system release family. Now we need to look at which are the predominant versions and against which set we need to test our product and the hotfix. Now, each of these version releases had another mix thrown into the bag. That is the flavors that have been released by Microsoft, supporting each of these versions. So predominantly, it has been home, professional, business, or enterprise versions. Now, how do we put a theoretical boundary to the number of VMs? Each of this combination, each of this set on which we need to actually test ends up being a VM or an endpoint, since our whole of testbed infrastructure is virtualized. Each ends up being a VM for us. So how many VMs do we need theoretically? I'm putting some kind of a boundary or numbers to it to understand. Taking 12 active products in the field, each having 10 active versions per product, and that being tested across 15 different operating systems, and each having a different version releases within themselves, the operating systems of a 10, and the different flavors to each operating system. If you put all of these numbers together, we come up with this number of 72,000 VMs that we are required to test the set. But we know that this is a max limit that we may have to face, but this is not a reality. Now, different products are supported on different operating systems. Forward-looking products or the latest releases do not support legacy OSs. Similarly, legacy product series do not support the latest OSs. But before we jump into how we sanitize this 72,000 and bring it down to a manageable set, this is something of a worst-case scenario we had in mind that we are looking at it, which is an undoable task. So further, the next exercise in the problem that we had at hand was, how do we make it a manageable set? And to visualize the problem in a two-dimensional array, it helps us visualize the end-to-end scope that we want to have. So just putting it across in a table format actually helped us visualize what we are trying to achieve. On the right-hand side, you will see the first column as the product versions, basically product and the associated versions. On the left-hand column, you would see the OS, different OSs or the different versions. Each single column represents one operating system that I need to test it on. So each of the cells become one test VM for me. So at the start of the equation, this is all blank, this is all unknown. And then we start off sanitizing or filling this blank board with what we know, what is the product and the OS operating system combination which actually works. So how do we reduce this huge monstrous number to a manageable test bed? We use some kind of a sanitization rules. The first one is we follow upon majorly on the product telemetry. Now, this is the in-house telemetry server that has been built. We tap into it to understand what is the product deployment relevance in the field, which are the predominant product versions and the node counts. We pick this data. At the start, we just populate the table of what is the customer installed OS against which product versions and start populating the data. And we just try to fill in the gaps. That's it at this stage. And then we try to, once this is done, we try to reach out to product management, to actual product owners to understand what is the churn out of their roadmaps in terms of declaring end of life for certain versions of the products or phasing out certain product series itself. So we gather this data. We also do a OS market study to understand which is the predominant OS at the moment for which we need to put in higher priority in our testing. So Windows 7 still enjoys higher priority compared to Windows 8.1. Windows 10 still is the leader in the operating system, but in Windows 10, which is the flavor which is the release which is the most predominant in the field, we need to concentrate or put in our more test efforts around that, and we draw some conclusions out of it. Once we have all of this data, we apply the golden rule of 80-20. We try to pick 20% of the combinations, top 20% of the combination based on the node count prevalence, based on the roadmap of how the products are going to go end of life, based on the OS market share, and we try to derive a manageable set of VMs on which the product and combination needs to be tested. This has reduced down our theoretical set to a manageable bunch of machines that we can actually build some solution on top of it now. Now, once we have the data that we want to test, what would be the next set? We know what we want to test, but how do we test it? We are at this stage, we are just envisioning that we need to have a CI/CD infrastructure because this is a daily data update. And the problem statement that we were chasing is we need to certify a DAT build. The turnaround time that was given to us, the upper bound of a turnaround time was 12 hours to certify a single build release, and subsequent days, we would again, on the very next day, we again would have another update to test it and certify it within a 12 hours window. So we are looking for a system which is highly available. It has some kind of redundancy built into it, so that every 12 hours we are churning out a build certification. So in case if one of the test beds gets occupied, how do we still continue with the testing effort? So we need some kind of a redundancy or a fail-safe mechanism into it. Since this is a continuously, every day there is a cycle which runs, we need to have a live track of how things are happening. So definitely there is a requirement for some kind of a monitor. At this stage, since we are looking at a daily release cycle, how do we trigger a set where from the build availability to test trigger to all the way looping back to result readiness or the production release readiness data being available, how do we could seamlessly tie this all information together so that stakeholders could take informed decisions? Now, based on this, we started designing the system now. And the first two problems, that is highly available and having a second level redundancy, we thought that addressing this particular area was one of the priority items. And this is how we have designed our redundant system or a fail-safe system. Taking a cue from data center power supply redundancy that is being built, which is usually a 2n+1 redundancy. What we did was, what the green boxes that you're seeing are the mainline images or the VMs on which tests would actually happen. These are primary active images for us. Now, before the test starts, a golden state of these images is stored as a secondary image set for us via a snapshot, so that in case the mainline images get corrupt during a test cycle or because of a previous test cycle that we have run on it, if there is a problem and if it is a known issue, we could remediate it by running automated scripts. And we would be talking about how we have built these remediations in our validation flow. If we still are unable to recover the images, what is the fallback plan? The fallback plan is to immediately switch to the secondary snapshot, which is represented by the blue. So you're building in the second layer of redundancy. In case these are incremental hotfix testing that we are talking about. Now, a hotfix n version could be patched over n-1 or n-2, and the subsequent so when we apply these hotfixes, the VM itself is going through a transition of getting incrementally patched. A couple of customers may choose to take one-step jump, couple may take three-step jump or five-step jump, and we have some kind of a study around it. So the system for the next test cycle may fail because a previous jump or previous testing would have in some way dirtied the image itself. So falling back to a known good state becomes key for us to quickly have a working test bed. So the green boxes represent the first primary images. The secondary images are our fail-safe images that we can revert back the snapshots to. In case the entire snapshot goes for a toss, or one section of a data storage or a network storage goes down where these set of group of images are stored, goes down, we have a second, a third layer of backup where images are stored in a network storage and can be brought alive or a clone created instantly. So we are looking at n+n+n redundancy. And since this is a mission critical hotfixes that are released every day for us, we thought having the entire setup mirrored to another geolocation is the fail-safe mechanism that we have. So exactly two replicas are maintained in two different geolocations for us. And just to cater the one of the possibilities that we may lose one data center and we still need to run this mission critical release testing happening. Similarly, the dashboard controller and the coordinator controller, the test execution services, are also mirrored across two geolocations for us. So this goes well beyond the n+1 redundancy that we talked about. It goes to n+n+n redundancy. this is the execution flow that we are talking about. Once we have a test bed ready, we need to validate how ready the test set is to begin the testing. So why is this important? Whenever a hotfix, understand the mindset of a hotfix testing engineer or the time crunch in which the hotfix test cycles are working. Whenever a hotfix test goes through fine, no one questions it. When it breaks or that particular build is rejected, the question comes, is it an environment issue? Is it a network issue? Is it a configuration issue? Or is it a hotfix which is actually performed wrong and the build needs to be rejected? How do you reduce these variables so that you can keep the only variable which fluctuates is your build under test? Rest of it is in a golden state. And this enables us to quickly reject a build or analyze if a failure is due to our build or it's an environment issue. And to certify the test bed for readiness of the or the test bed being ready to execute subsequent tests or the certification suite, we need to validate and certify the test bed. This we do it through post. Once the test bed is certified, this is a stage where we pool for our build availability as and when the dev signs on for it. And then we pick up the build, we push it down to the infrastructure, different mechanisms. I'll talk more details about how we do it. And we trigger the test, tabulate the results, push back the results back to a dashboard so that seamlessly a view is represented to stakeholders. Breaking down this flow into major sections, the first step is the heartbeat system. The controller sends across a heartbeat. Prior to our actual build test, the controller just checks the pulse of the entire environment. It sends a heartbeat signal across the entire VM infrastructure to know whether the VM infrastructure or VM endpoints are alive and are ready to take the next step of building, of deployment of the test build, and can we run our tests onto it. Now, there may be instances, as I talked about earlier, that due to previous runs, these images could be unstable, could have gone offline, network connection would have lost. So we have bucketized a bunch of these failures and different remediations, which can be run through automation itself, wherever possible, to bring these images online. Now, these images are also living images. These are operating systems which have been patched over the time. So they would have developed some kind of artifacts. The hard disk could be too small for the next set of tests. The size on the hard disk may be too small to take in the next test build package. The CPUs would have gone through, the CPU usage would have spiked because of other products being updated. Now, in such a case, if we push my test build onto it, how reliable will I get my results? These are all uncontrolled variables which would have a great influence when I'm trying to run a time scheduled hotfix testing. So I want to reduce these variables. So the system heartbeat service help us do this. It helps us certify the test bed so that it is out of question for us. Whether when a failure occurs, I know it's because of a hotfix, not because of the environment. Okay. The results of this are pushed back to DB for historically looking to it and referring to it for different patterns of failures. Whereas also a live dashboard is updated for us to know where we are in the post power on self-test stage. An email is shot across to the stakeholders that the first stage in the test certification process has triggered off. Once the test bed is certified for readiness, the second stage starts our wait for build availability. As soon as the build is available from the developer, we use HTTP long polling to check for the build availability. And once the build availability is confirmed, we move on to the stage 3. That is, the run controller, the run service pushes this build onto our test infrastructure. Now, given our case, we had a bunch of VMs spawning from enterprise class customers to a desktop consumer customers. So Couple of these machines were centrally managed through a central server from where we could push the builds. These are managed machines. Some of them needed more of one-to-one push of the builds. Accordingly, the logic is being built in a test suite, the run test controller. It would push the builds and trigger off individual tests suited for that particular product, that particular version, and the live updates of which modules are getting run are pushed back to our DB. Now, we have broken down the process into different sections of the test suite such that each test suite runs each individual module test cases, updates it live in the DB. The upper bound that was given to us was a 12 hours window that we were initially targeting to achieve, but we could reject a build at 11th hour looking at the results. That's a costly affair because the next turnaround cycle would be for the next 10 hours, we would be over exhausting our resources by running around the clock test cycles. So modular live status feedback to the dashboard helps us reject a build in case of a failure much earlier. Imagine we have a 12-hour window to certify the build, but if we are able to reject the build, if it's a genuine failure in the first 1 to 2 hours, that saves 10 hours window for us. This is a crucial time window so that the next cycle can be triggered much faster. It gives developers enough time to fix it, give us a time bound second batch of build, and that could be going through the certification process much faster. So a live dashboard data is being pushed of the results, and everything is being pushed back to the email. A regular update is being pushed back to the stakeholders to give an update of where the progress is. Now, once the test set is completed, the machine here, the automated system stops just at the edge from where it could automatically sign off and push the builds for production push. Now, cautiously, we have kept this as a stakeholder decision to look at the results, view it, and sign off on the build for production release. These are critical security releases which would get mass deployed on millions of nodes. The final call has to be a human intervention to sign this off. Once this test set is completed, we need to prepare our test bed for the next cycle. We need to clean up the systems. This is where we roll back the system to a known good state. We recycle the environment. This is an investment of today's run to make sure that tomorrow's run is a success. Every day, this exercise needs to be done. We roll back the images to a known clean state. I talked about how different customers use different packaging mechanisms. A couple of them would like to go stepwise if they would like to have from n to n+1 to n+3. But a customer who is at n may choose to come from n-1, or he may choose to come from n-5. The rollback mechanism has an inbuilt logic into it, where based on the, again, prevalence of the data, prevalence of how the customers actually upgrade in the field, we have to a certain degree calculated to what steps we can walk back, and from where a direct jump to the current state or the testable build state needs to be tested. And the rollback service handles all of this. Once the test is completed, you're all at the n+nth version, but to test it from previous build for the next release, we have to walk back certain steps, and this rollback mechanism gets the test bed ready for us. Okay, we talked about a lot about the controller being the heart and soul of the entire solution. Now, what this controller is for us is a seamless coordinator of all testing exercises. So we talked about building VMware infrastructure that we have a redundancy of 1 to 2 levels. But what about the controller? Will it become a bottleneck for us? Or how do we build a fail-safe mechanism into it? So we adopted an active-passive model. Now, there are a bunch of controllers built which are mirror images of each other. And using a hashing algorithm, one of them is declared as the active controller, which coordinates the test exercises as and when they are happening. Independently, these results are stored in an external DB, and each of the passive controllers pool for these results to know exactly which step of execution we are. And simultaneously, all these passive and active controller talk to each other for a heartbeat signal. So why this is required is, in case if an active controller goes down, one of the secondary controllers, again through a hashing mechanism, is nominated to become the next active in line. And this takes over seamlessly from the exact same step of same product test execution to carry it forward to the next stage. So this switchover is our fail-safe in case our controller, one of the controller breaks down. And to have some kind of fail-safe, further fail-safe mechanism, we have hosted a couple of controllers in one data center and another, rest of the controllers in the secondary data center that we have. So there is a bunch of items which happen at the controller, which is a lot of backend coordination jobs. But controller and the kind of seamless value, a bird's eye view that it needs to represent, this controller needs to have a front-end visualization of how the progress is happening throughout the test cycle to give you an instant recap of where we are in the process. So that brings in the need for a dashboard for us. And it also calls out a pin, or it points out pinpointedly where the actual failures are for us and helps engineers to debug on a focused area in case of there is a failure. Now, we talked a lot about post or the test readiness or test bed certification, and we talked about different buckets of failures. Now, a couple of buckets, the test certification success depends upon how ready your test bed is, how clean your test bed is. Now, we talked about different failure buckets. Couple of buckets to talk about is your network connection, CPU spikes, hard disk availability, and there could be other buckets. Now, some of them can be remediated through VMware APIs. Some of them you cannot. You cannot anticipate all points of failure, but for the ones you can anticipate, you can build in remediations. And if there is no remediation possible, the post module, the power on self-test module, has the capability to spawn a backup image. Before I talk about what kind of hardware we are currently at and how we reached here, we started off small with rack mount servers of individual, a bunch of VMs trying to build it. And when we were trying to optimize the framework itself, we realized hardware could also turn out to be a bottleneck. And that's when our understanding of hardware, how hardware could play a major role. Even rebooting of the systems on a slower hardware could rob you of a couple of crucial minutes. If you throw in a couple of reboots, that's easily 20-30 minutes lost in their execution cycle. So the current setup is a Dell, based on a Dell Blade chassis, having a few terabytes of RAM and a few hundreds of CPU processing power. The storage for us we have used is a Dell EMC Extreme IO box. This is a SSD based rig, gives you the best in class performance for image booting as well as for immediate response times. So the execution times are far superior, and the efficiency or the bottleneck which hardware would have driven for us is completely taken care by this. So with this and maturing our existing framework over these different iterative cycles, when we started off solving this equation, there were a couple of pieces, like the post test being added was fairly recent in the last 2 quarters. The rollback mechanism has evolved over time. And similar modules have been pushed into our framework to make it far more robust, far more efficient. With all of these changes put into place, this is where we are at the moment. We, from the initial ask of certifying a build in 12 hours, and we are not even talking about cleanup or getting the test bed ready, which is beyond these 12 hours window that we are looking at. We are at a stage where we can certify one test run completely in 3 hours window. Across the products, the rollback takes just 30 minutes. A heartbeat check takes another 30 minutes for us. A complete end-to-end test cycle is completed within 4 hours window. We have had instances when one of our hotfixes failed for the day and we had second hotfix released immediately within a few hours window. Our test bed was ready to take in. And on occasion, very rarely though, we have seen a third iteration of the hotfix given for us for our testing. And the test bed is still ready without exhausting our test engineers. And this is where the system has progressed into. The current state of the products that we support close to 7 products which are in production, a VM set of 250 plus. Now, this is a moving number for us. It goes through churns depending upon the latest operating system supported and based on the quarterly review that we do to churn out older operating system and older products out of the equation. So we support operating systems from Windows 7 to Windows 10, and Windows 11 also eventually would be added to this rig, from server classes from 2K to 2K19, Mac OS and Red Hat Linux also. You're looking at what our actual live test results are. On the left-hand side, you're looking at for one of our product series and the OS set that it supports. Now, I picked up one product which has lesser OS set so that I could just fit in the screenshot into my PPT. So the first column on the left-hand side, you would see the product and the operating system supported. The subsequent columns is different module and gives you details about how the progression is. And this is what I was talking about, modular test execution and live update. So this gives us a failure point. If there is one, it loops it back and immediately we know whether one specific OS has misfired. And if there is a failure, we can quickly debug it. On the right-hand side, you actually see that live test completion results, which from a stakeholder's perspective is a pretty clean, visible indicator. They don't have to go into the percentage of completion or anything. It's a clear status signing off whether the test set is ready for production release or no. This setup does come with its own set of challenges, and what we see as a challenge from our experiences, we need to do the regular exercises of churning out products from a point of view of relevance to keep the set manageable, to look at how we can look at the node count prevalence in their field and take an informed decision. There is no point in testing only 1,000 deployed configuration and giving it the same kind of a weightage in testing as 10 million deployed node configuration. So we churn out based on different rules, and this churning out needs data inputs, which has to be periodic in nature. So we do this exercise quarterly. Now, the operating systems or the test VMs we talked about are a living entity which goes through their own patch cycles. Now, we do this once in a month, the patching of the entire operating system rigs, and that would mean you have to patch your mainline images, and subsequently you will have to create a backup images of it, so that it takes it's the rig maintenance that we have to do. Hardware aging also plays an important role. It is not as prevalent as you have to test it once a month or once a quarter, but this is something that you need to keep an eye on. As and when you start seeing some lag, you will have to pick up data, and this is where our test response timing or also plays an important role, recording them and analyzing any sluggishness in the test turnaround time and what kind of optimizations we could do. Or it is hardware churn or a certain rig failing. This helps in hardware maintenance. These kind of inputs do help us. So you put on different hats, trying to look at prevalence data, talking to program managers, looking into telemetry, building some tools to analyze the data, as well as you look at, as one part of the job, to look at how the hardware is also behaving. Not frequently, but yes, this is part of the equation. Now, some of the key takeaways from our learning from this rapid test and deploy model. Quicker certification of hotfixes is possible with the highest quality. This model can be extended beyond hotfixes also. When you have minor fixes being built by the developers and they're sitting there tested, but you are unable to push it to production because they are waiting for that monthly patch release cycle or the mainline release, which may be 1 quarter or 2 quarter, depending upon what kind of release cycles you have. Now, this code, which is fixed issue, has not been deployed in customer environment. Basically, the customer has not drawn value out of it. Using this model, we can quickly do a testing which gives you high confidence of the testing environment, release it to production, the minor release on a daily basis, where as and when the fixes are ready, even it could be a small fix or it could be a feature enhancement, which could be pushed back to the customer instantly so that the value add starts coming in. And early field testing becomes a reality. If you are looking at some major feature rehaul and you're trying to push incremental changes, looking at the pulse of the customer, you can quickly do course correction. So field testing in a very efficient manner at much larger, rather than taking a decision later in the cycle to throw away the entire design and relook at it. Early field testing of minor features could be pushed onto the customer set using this model. This model also can be used to certify quickly core builds, which are internally consumed within the company for different point products. Now, since McAfee has a layered technology where one layer gets consumed by different groups and different solutions, business solutions are built over it. So internally, we have internal product teams who are customers to the core group, and core builds could be churned out in similar fashion for making products available for consumption by the actual consumer. This could be internal customers or external customers. So this were a couple of pointers of how we built our CI/CD system, and we wanted to share our learnings with you. So we are at the end of our presentation, and thank you so much for listening to our journey and the learnings that we had. We have a couple of questions. Please, John.
Yeah, Vital, come on. This is wonderful. You're right on time, and I just wanted to also share thank you to you and Narayan and Rakesh. The work you've done and shared is just tremendous. I also know you're presenting now. It's 12 and a half hours ahead of the conference time, so it's definitely, you could use some of the famous coffee here from the Pacific Northwest to go on there. And also I wanted to just those couple of questions, if you want to take a quick look at those, we can go through those. Those would be great. I know it's a very exciting time at McAfee with the FireEye merger going on and things like that, and the scope of the customers you work with. If you could maybe share a little bit about how many people or nodes, endpoints get impacted on there, and then also how do you take in decisions from field testing, support, and all those things. So maybe just do that, and then we can wrap up with so people can fill out the survey and get their break.
Sure. The hot fixes that we're talking about, basically, it's a critical fix for our security products that get shipped every day. And the deployment of this is in the tune of millions of nodes. It's not just 1 million, it's hundreds and millions of nodes. That entire test set gets distributed. So you could take hot fixes for our signature release, content release, or it could be a critical patch release that we are talking about. So this deployment is across the spectrum, across all nodes that we are talking about. Okay, so that definitely answers the first question. The second one is how do we, the second question, I'll just read it back. How do we coordinate the decision to fall back? Now, tech support would represent the customer experience. Engineering review slide 10 covers the possibility. So how do we decide on the fallback? Now, during the certification process, for us, each module, since each module certification and pass rate needs to be absolute, we cannot have false, since we are talking about security products, we would want, and these patches, which are incremental in nature, the first is, it should not break the existing parental software for which it is patching. Second, it should not break third-party apps from performing its due job. Imagine a hotfix is being applied as Outlook plugin and your Outlook starts not working. There are a bunch of plugins for Chrome, and you have updated one of those Chrome plugins, and your Chrome starts crashing. So it's not your app which is crashing, but you're influencing a third-party app. So we look out for these signals. These are red flags for us. How is our product behaving after the patching mechanism? So we look for functionality. We look for abnormal behavior within our products. We look for abnormal behavior within third-party products in that given test environment. Within our products itself, per module, different scenarios that we run across, how are we behaving against each of these module certifications? And are we holding it tight? Are we holding it in a green zone? And then that's the rule that we follow. And if any deviations we see, we immediately flag it. And since the test bed is so matured enough, we ask the developers, hey, come have a look. We see a deviation, let's work it through. If it is a false flag, let's work it through and certify it rather than pushing the build to the production. If there is a new build ready for our testing, we have the time window to certify it. So this is how we decide on the rollback plan. And our live dashboard contributes greatly towards this.
Excellent. Well, that's the time we have. And let me just say thank you so much. I mean, the work you do day in and day out makes it possible for the rest of us to be safe and do the work the company's trying to do. So it's really a critical function, and you touch so many people and stuff. So it's really great to hear your journey and how you've been able to really take that to a whole nother level. So in today's environment where people are being attacked often and quickly and with sophistication, that we're able to stay safe. So thank you again. And to the people who attended, if you take a minute and just complete the survey, we'd appreciate that so we can approve. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, John, for moderating for us. And thank you, group, for attending this session. It means a lot. I've put across all of 3 of our contacts. You could reach out to us in case if you want to talk further about the implementation or some help that we could share with you guys in a limited capacity. So thank you so much. I would now go ahead and stop sharing my screen.